right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order this January meeting of the Delaware County Juvenile Detention Board of Managers. With us, we're doing this because of the current spike in COVID cases. We're doing today in a hybrid fashion. With us in person, we have Dr. Monica Taylor, we have Candace Linehan, we have Judge Nathaniel Nichols, and we have Shakima Fulmore Towson. Sorry, Shakima.
That's fine.
And myself. And I think via Zoom, we currently have Christine Ricks-Fletcher and Elaine Schaefer, as well as our solicitor, Shelley Smith. Is there anyone else on Zoom that I missed? That's all. Okay. So with that, I will get to our first item, which is a Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone could please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and as always, we have two bites at the apple in terms of public comment. We have public comment at the beginning, which has to be limited to items that are specifically on our agenda for today. And then there will also be public comment at the end, which can be with regard to any topic that's associated with juvenile detention. As always, members of the public who would like to make their voice heard, we ask that they provide their name and their address and that they keep their comments to less than 5 minutes. I'm looking in person here if there's anyone who would like to make any public comments. And I'd also mention that for those of you watching at home, there is a sort of virtual means of providing comments, and that is to send an email to JD, as in Juvenile Detention, BOM, so JDBOM, as in Juvenile Detention Board of Managers, at co.delaware.pa.us. And when doing so, again, please provide your name and address so that we can provide that to the record and we can read that out. And as of now, I have not seen any comments that we've received, but if anyone else has seen any, please let me know. So hearing nothing on the public comment front, we can move to the next item, which would be an approval of the minutes of the December 21st meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So move.
Motion, is there a second?
Second, Shakima Towson.
Is there any questions or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? The motion passes. I also make note that our controller, Joanne Phillips, is with us as well. Next item is the introduction and report from our new superintendent, Mr. David Irizarry. David, it's your show.
Well, can everyone hear me? Just want to start by saying good evening. I want to formally thank Delaware County's Board of Managers for Juvenile Detention and Delaware County Executive Director Howard Lazarus for appointing me in this very important position, in which I'm pleased and honored to accept. To our criminal justice and community-based partners of Delaware County, I look forward to meeting you all and collaborating with you all. I believe that together we'll make this juvenile justice system one of the best in the state of Pennsylvania. And last but not least, to the young men, young women, and families of Delaware County, I want you to sincerely know that you have an advocate who's going to be working for you day in and day out, very hard, building toward a better future. Again, my name is David Irizarry, formerly Deputy Director of Philadelphia's Office of Violence Prevention, which was a department that focused on reducing homicides and shootings in the city of Philadelphia by addressing root causes. Prior to that, I worked for another administration for a community supervision program that targeted individuals who were between the ages of 14 and 25 who had a history of carrying guns and committing violent crimes, and supervised well over 1,000 per fiscal year. And very happy to say that less than 2% of those individuals were involved in a violent crime. Just happy to be here, happy to be part of the county, happy to be a part of the change that's happening here. So just thank everybody, thank the board, and happy to move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I will just say, as I said at the outset, we're thrilled to have you join us in Delco, Dave. I know you have some going back ties to Delaware County. You came to us via a very competitive process for this position. And, you know, I think in the few weeks you've been with us, my understanding is you've been doing a lot of listening, a lot of meeting with various stakeholders, and I think that's a great place to start. I'll open it to the board if anyone has any questions or comments for our new superintendent.
Welcome. Welcome. Look forward to working with you.
All right. Next item for today is the monthly report from our juvenile court and probation services. And so I'm not sure who's coming up today.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kirsten Keenan. I'm the resource supervisor for Delaware County Juvenile Probation. We currently have 2 youths who are currently in detention. One youth is at Montgomery County Youth Center, and we have another one in Chester County Youth Center. Do you need to know lengths of service for both of them?
If you can share that.
One youth was at Aspire Youth Center for 25 days, and the other one's, the youth has been at Montgomery County for 42 days now. The other youth was at Aspire for 26 days and at Chester County Detention Center for 4.
Any comments, questions from
I
the
do have a question. I appreciate very much how quickly we get these reports. I believe one of our fellow board members did ask, and I don't know the answer, of are we able to get a number or count on the youth that have been turned away from centers or would have normally been placed if we could have?
Yes, I have that number.
So we've been working with our provider to be able to capture that data.
Okay.
Without having been able to get a sophisticated way to do it, Kirsten has begun tracking them based on the recorded data in the system. And then and that captures everything that happens after hours and on call because it's very specifically noted as an on-call contact. What we have not been successful in capturing is the day-to-day transactions that occur unless they're reported. So we have asked the management team to send her communication on that so that she can incorporate that. We are trying to fine-tune the way the report will be structured. What we hope to achieve from it is it will be similar to the census report in that it will capture the same data, including the most serious charge, which is not being captured at the moment. But additionally, it will just simply say not detained, right? NA for the detention center. In 95% of the times, it's a bed. You know, it's either no beds or denials. So we'll try to capture, based on the 5 facilities that we work with, whether it's a no bed availability or whether it's a denial. So presently, our juvenile court judge is kind of looking at the details, and he's offered some feedback. So we'll incorporate those comments. We'll share it, of course, with the president judge, and then likely incorporate it into the census report in some way that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. So in other words, there are juveniles that would have been detained if bed was available or if they weren't denied. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I think something that we've talked about before is that those that were denied and what we're calling a forced alternative instead of an appropriate alternative, they, you know, in some cases, they've remained in the community and they're reporting to court as expected. In other cases, we've reported that they've absconded. Some of that information is also to be able to track that once they've absconded, if they're apprehended on that warrant, were we then able to detain, or did we have to return to a GPS? So we've had about a half a dozen or so that weren't issued. They were on the monitor because there was no bed. They absconded. They were apprehended on the warrant. We didn't have a bed. They were placed again on the GPS, and they've since absconded. So we're trying to figure out how we can capture that and make it clear without the identity of who's repeating, what those patterns look like.
Sure. And how has COVID affected your personnel in the means of being able to go out in person or having people report to them? Have there been any, has there
Well,
been
we've
any
had,
impact?
yeah, we've certainly reduced the in-person contact, especially if there's any positive COVID in the house or reporting, and we've done a lot virtually. But in the same case, last Friday, or this past Friday, we went out and we did a search because there was information that was received. So the staff geared up and went out and did the search. So we're able to get out there as we can,
Sure.
and certainly when we have to. But it's difficult, and I know that that's the same thing that's affecting some of these facilities, is there's just not sufficient staffing.
Thank you.
I have just a general question. Do you see, in conjunction with COVID, et cetera, any trends with respect to the juveniles that are coming in? I'm just going to give you some categories that pop into my mind, either violence, drugs, behavior, community, school, things like that. Do you see any of those trends? Anything that pops out at you and says, wait a minute, this is different?
Well, I think earlier in the pandemic, certainly when schools were primarily virtual, there was less supervision in the home because some families and guardians still had to work or, be out of the house. Many of the schools have returned to in-person, which I think helps for those youth who are attending school. We have a population that is not in school because we do serve youth from the ages of 10 to 21. So we do have individuals, I'll say, that are not in school and they're still under our supervision. They've not yet attained the age of 21. That population is sometimes difficult because they're not working, they're not in school. I don't know if I would say it was specific to COVID without the school component.
And just a programming request, so the board members who are here in person, make sure you're talking into the mic.
Sorry.
For those of us that are on Zoom, so they can actually hear us.
Thank you.
Question for me, so, even prior to COVID, how often, what part of the protocol were community visits associated? So do you have a unit in which goes to the home prior to, just to do wellness checks, et cetera, or are we just going out for, there's a weapon in the home and doing searches?
Well, we do home assessments and home visits as the case dictates. We don't have an enforcement unit that I think you and I had spoke about related to similar to Philadelphia, where it's a specific unit and that unit happens to carry firearms and there's some additional training with that. We have, usually it's 2 to 3 people who will go out depending on the reason for the visit. If it's a traditional home visit, check-in, wellness, it's a PO and a colleague. If it's a search, it involves a supervisor or an administrator on site. We do school visits, we do facility visits, we do community visits with some kids in a local, like a library or in some other areas where they're comfortable. Sometimes being inside the house can be chaotic.
How would you say you would assess your staff's willingness to go out? Tomorrow, we have a partnership with local law enforcement that are willing to go out with you and I guess, protect you if need be. Think you would have a good amount of staff that are willing to go out?
I think there's a percentage of our staff who would go out without question. Some of our newer staff have not been through the defensive tactics and other training that we would require them to be able to go out because of COVID. We've just been able to get the CPR, first aid, and airborne and bloodborne pathogens back on the table. We just did the online portion. They were able to split it for us because of the numbers being high, but we were scheduled to be on site for the training. But the defensive tactics is up close, in person. You're role-playing while you're getting that certification. So that's been a little bit challenging, and we hope that in the next couple of months, those newer groups that have come in over the last 2 years would be able to go through that training. But I guess generally speaking, if the police are available, they do go out with us now. Chester's accompanied us with 2 men and 2 cars on Friday.
Any other questions from the board? All right, thank you both. Next item for the agenda today is a status of securing juvenile detention space and somewhat relatedly, the central processing facility progress. And I'll call to the podium our Executive Director, Mr. Lazarus, to give us an update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm also going to rely on Mr. Irizarry to fill in some of the gaps. He and I had an exceptional conversation with the Human Services Director in Chester County and the Director of their Youth Center, and he committed to getting us a contract for review this week, by the end of the week. We went through, in that conversation, went through all the aspects of what would be in the contract, including training of staff that we would provide. We talked about the facilities and the services that they would provide as part of the host for us. We discussed that we needed somewhere between 15 and 20 staff. Mr. Irizarry has said we probably need probably 15 full-time and 5 part-time. So he is working with the Chief Personnel Officer, Mr. Johnson, to conduct the outreach right now to re-engage the former counselors, as we're going to refer to them going forward, as well as conducting some outreach to find new sources of staff. Our goal would be to hire the staff immediately. One, because staffing right now in any aspect of governmental operations is difficult, but also would provide the opportunity for that staff to job shadow and receive the training necessary to operate at the Chester County facility. There's sufficient funds within the budget that council adopted this year for the juvenile center, so that would not be a problem either. We are going to work with AFSCME to adjust the rate of pay to that which Chester County pays its counselors as well. So those are ongoing. Mr. Irizarry's been very much willing and able to step into the breach and lead some of those efforts as well. I do want to talk a little bit about timing. If we get the agreement next week, we can probably sit down, negotiate whatever needs to be negotiated, work through the solicitor to the board and the county solicitor to get that on the council meeting for February 2nd. However, this board doesn't meet again until 2 weeks later, so we would, if we went through that sequentially, we wouldn't get the agreement to council until council's meeting on the 16th of February, because this next board meeting is a Tuesday before that. So we may want to work some of those logistics, and if the goal is to get that expedited, we'd have to work through a sequence where you could see the agreement, provide comments, but not do it in a setting where you'd have a quorum issue. But we can work through that. So those things are, I think, moving forward. If we don't receive the agreement this week, I will probably seek council support in elevating it a little bit, because it's been a while. But I have every reason to believe Mr. Borkovitz and the director will do everything they can to get us the draft agreement this week. They were very much committed. The agreement will take the form of 1 year with an option for a second year at our discretion. I think it's important to Chester County also, as they're having some staffing challenges and also some revenue challenges, to work with us to get this done as quickly as possible. So that is where we are on the Chester. And David, if you want to add anything, please do.
I just think 2 things that Second Director Lazarus skimmed over that are very important. So there's going to be opportunity to re-engage former juvenile detention staff, pay them more than what they were being paid before. The wage is going to be $18.96 to $21 an hour. Prior, I believe it was around $14 an hour. So able for folks who are willing and able and want to re-engage in that.
Really sorry, but those of us on Zoom can't hear what Mr. Irizarry is saying.
I apologize.
Can I ask you to repeat it in the mic?
Yeah, no
No, I think you
Everyone
have
should come on
to,
up.
you might have to stand up at the mic. Sorry,
Sean, is that mic not on?
but I know it's important.
Yep, for sure. Can you hear me now, Councilwoman?
Thank you. Yes.
All right, great. So I just wanted to re-highlight two things that Executive Director Lazarus kind of skipped over briefly. So, number one, there is an opportunity to re-engage former CDC staff. The pay rate that we're able to pay them is going to be more than what they were paying before. They were making about $14 an hour. Our range is going to be $18.96 to $21 an hour. And at that point, you know, we want everybody to re-interview for the process. Obviously, they're going to be given priority for those who fit the mold. But I think, you know, it's for us to do our due diligence to make sure we kind of re-interviewed everybody and make sure that we're sending the right folks over to Chester County. So those are just two things I want to highlight: higher pay and some staff that have been idle in the past. We're going to be able to re-engage them as soon as tomorrow and work through, you know, what we need to work through.
And just for me,
Mike?
two
Sure.
procedural kind of points of input.
Sure.
One is, you know, I think you're hearing certain things being sort of said as a fait accompli. Of course, this is all up for the board's input in
course.
terms of terms of contract and pay rates and whatnot, so nothing should be considered set in stone. You know, I think Mr. Azari and Mr. Lazarus should be looking for input here. Secondly, in terms of the challenges of sequencing, I think we have all heard repeatedly the reasons for why there is great urgency of getting something up and standing as soon as we possibly can. We have faced similar challenges of sequencing with the need for council's approval and the jail oversight board's approval. And I think, you know, again, similarly, the jail oversight board meets only once a month, as does this board. And what I'd suggest, I think, and I'd certainly welcome the solicitor's view otherwise, but what we did do there, and I think we could do here, is if there is a contract that's ready for review by this board, what we could certainly do is have that shared via email, solicit input in an informal fashion, perhaps. If we feel the need, we could certainly call a special meeting if we needed to. Or what we could do is get that sort of informal input before council proceeds at their first meeting in February. Again, if we have a draft contract in place, and then, you know, have council approve it, subject to further input by this board. Sure. And then when this board meets, have it really be more of a ratification. And that way, there's been a public hearing about it. There has been the opportunity for input at several steps by this board, and we get the necessary support both here and from county council. Ms. Smith, I don't know if you have anything further on how I describe that.
Excuse me, I do not. I will say that the Office of Open Records discourages voting by email. However, I think where there's an emergency, the fact that we're discussing here at this public meeting the need to do this, and the fact that any action would be ratified at a public meeting with a full discussion at that meeting as well, I think would satisfy the spirit of the law. So I think we're in good shape.
Is there a term sheet in addition to the term of the agreement, sort of standard of care or what we're expecting the children to be, how they'll be taken care of, and what Chester County is expecting? Just a basic term sheet, not the whole agreement, but what's making the skeleton of the agreement.
Ms. Phillips, we can reach out and get something that gives the outline of the proposed agreement. And just to echo what Mr. Madden said, certainly all terms will come back. They're all subject to review by the solicitor and certainly by approval by the board and the council. So I don't want to imply that things are a done deal when they're not. I'm just going through in a summary fashion what we've spoken about. But we'll in fact, Mr. Azari and I will go out and visit the facility next Monday.
Yep.
It's not the formal walk-through visit that the board would want. It's a chance to go out, see what's there, and talk through it. Hopefully by that time we'll have agreement in hand and we'll be able to draft agreement in hand, and we can go through the terms that are there. What we've spoken about are security, meals, education. They've expressed their need for training as well. One of the things that's come up is that since we're staffing the pod, there's no, or at least a very limited right of refusal for the young people who we would need to place there. So those are things that we'll have to address through the agreement before we bring it back to you. And certainly any input or any thoughts that the board has on what you'd like to see in the agreement would be good to have those sent to David as quickly as possible.
Mr. Lazarus, I just had a question on timing and onboarding the staff. As you mentioned, there is possibly additional training that Chester County would like our staff to have. What does the timeline look on that? And are we going to be able to onboard folks and get them trained in time to be able to staff this?
So I think Chester County already has their internal process in which when an employee comes aboard, they're trained, they go through their series of training, right? My conversations with Deb, who's the director over there, is we really want to just fit within their management system, within their structure. They have a series of training. Most of them are over a 2-week period. And again, our meeting on the 24th, we're going to talk about these things in detail. She asked us to come down, and she really wanted to discuss some of the logistics of what it can look like. But I would assume once somebody's hired, there's a 2 or 3 week training period, and at that point, the pod will be available to be.
Okay, so they would be hired by us, go through all of our HR processes, and then go to Chester County and go through all of their 2 weeks of training.
Correct. The plan is, again, we're going to oversee the HR process, and at that point, they're going to kind of fall within their structure down there, go through their training, be supervised by their staff, and be a part of their center.
Okay.
We thought it would be too much of a troublesome for our pod to be acted independently of the center.
Mm-hmm.
Too much rooms for error there. At that point, we want to fit right within their structure, and that's a lot of our conversations are going to be around how do we operationalize that.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a quick question. I wanted to ask a little bit about the mechanism we have in place to ensure that we're not vulnerable to liability on who we hire. Is there some mechanism to make sure that the AG's prosecution is going to be not involve anybody that we hire?
Ms. Schaefer, when I spoke to Mr. Martin, his feedback from the Attorney General's office was as we hire people to send the names to them, and they would let us know if there was a reason to be concerned.
Okay, that sounds good.
Any other questions or comments from the board related to the progress there with Chester County?
The only question, I know you had shared we could attend the January 24th for a brief, but are there plans for us to have a board-led tour at some point, and how soon in the I guess timeline of many activities
Sure.
that we're moving, are we able to do that?
So what Howard and I were told was once the contract is conformed, and again, hopefully we'll have something at the end of the week, there's going to be an official board tour led by staff over there. So we have an unofficial, and that's kind of just Deb opened her doors for us unofficially. She committed to 15, 20 minutes, and she wanted another maybe 30 or 45 minutes meeting one-on-one with me. And at that point, we'll have something official. So as soon as the contract's conformed, at that point, you'll get a plethora of dates. Hopefully, amongst the group, we can decide on one. But we'll make sure that we have majority of the group here and be able to move forward.
Are folks on Zoom now hearing Mr. Azari?
Yes.
Okay, great. And just to be clear on that, it would be, what you're saying is following the receipt of a draft agreement, but before any agreement is finalized.
For sure.
There was also some concern with COVID numbers spiking last week about going down for a visit until hopefully the trend peaks and comes down.
Anything else from the board?
I
I have some questions just about their facility, but I'll just wait till we, move further with the agreement.
If I could briefly, just the other item on item 7 is the central processing facility. So the lead on that right now is Mr. Mark Woolley, who's the Deputy Executive Director. He's worked with the architect. They finished their preliminary conversations with the direct stakeholders, with the district attorney, public defender, president, judge. So they will now, he'll take that feedback and start what I would call an actionable or detailed design. Certainly, we can bring the summary back to both this board and to the Jail Oversight Board before anything is finalized. I told Mr. Woolley, and he agreed that we need to have shovels and hammers underway by the end of February. So we're pushing that schedule as quickly as we can. The design work will be done under the existing task order contract that council approved for architectural engineering services. But before any work is done, we'll have it. Make sure we provide for appropriate review of the plans for the central processing facility. Some of the other questions that come from that are who's going to staff it. I've talked to the sheriff about it. That may be one option. The other could be the courthouse and park police. So we need to make sure that from a security standpoint it's staffed. We also then need to ensure that not only do we have room for the district attorney, public defender, and the courts, but also, as we've talked about, for the social service providers that we want to have at the site as well. So those things are part of the draft program that's been discussed so far, and it just needs to now go into a conceptual design phase so we have something to show everyone.
Is a portion then being reserved for the juvenile detention? Because I don't know where that part is that's being reserved.
Yeah, so
Unless
I'd
I'm
just like to
missing.
offer a couple thoughts to follow on to what Mr. Lazarus said. And one is exactly what you alluded to, Ms. Phillips. What we have discussed from day one is while it's important that we move forward expeditiously, what we're doing in terms of juvenile detention doesn't live in a vacuum, right? We have other significant, items, most notably around adult detention, the adult jail, that obviously with the deprivatization, there's a lot going on there. And having a central processing, central booking setup is really a linchpin with regard to a lot of what's going on the adult side. Having the public defender's office, the DA's office playing a more active role at that early stage in the criminal justice process at a time when the county is taking over the jail, I think has been identified as a way to really identify folks who perhaps can be diverted before going into George W. Hill kind of by default, and tackle the population levels more proactively. So I think there's urgency on that front, but it also has to be balanced with ensuring that all of the stakeholders really understand what's going on in the process, have, most notably the courts, that they have, a say in how things proceed. And back to your comment, Ms. Phillips, we've been speaking about from day one that whatever we do there can't bias the ability for the Lima facility, if this board decides that's the prudent way to go, that it be used again for juvenile detention. So, while it will proceed, without being held back by a determination, it also needs to move forward in a fashion where if this board chooses, that can still be the case, that there can be a dual purpose for that facility. There has been, and Ms. Smith, please correct me if I misspeak, but there has been confirmation from what would be the appropriate, is the OPC? What is the appropriate body statewide that confirmed that they would support the idea of a dual purpose function so long as there's no,
The Department
separate
of Human
sight and sound?
Services.
Yeah, please.
The Department of Human Services.
Okay.
So the plans going forward, the architects looked at the design, they're looking at the central processing side, then they're just leaving a blank slate on the juvenile detention side, like a box,
They're going to separate the facilities so they're not.
I'm sorry, I'm still having trouble hearing the
Can you hear me now?
speakers.
Is it better?
Yeah, My
No.
question was, I know
There you go.
there's architects that are out to do preliminary design work for the central processing. But are they just drawing a box where the juvenile detention is because there's been no input as to what that would look like? Or this board has not discussed that.
Yeah.
So, and I will say, I'll echo some of other members, but it seems that there's going to be a need for Delaware County to have its own facility. That's where I stand now, that's my understanding. Hopefully, it's going to be a way better one. We have new leadership, we have new ideas, but I still hear that we're sending people away and that we need that. So I'm just wondering what that looks like in the design. Is it being reserved? And what part's being reserved? I think this board
Yeah,
would need
I
to
think-
know that.
So one extreme would be exactly how you're describing it, where you literally cordon off a part of it and it cannot be touched at any costs, right? Another extreme would be there's no regard to any future use for juvenile detention, use the entire
Right.
footprint. I think, and Mr. Lazarus, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's probably much closer to the first end of that spectrum, but perhaps you may temporarily use some elements of that in a way that you can't relocate, when and if it gets used for juvenile detention.
I think it's an accurate statement. There'll be the opportunity to physically separate the two activities, reserving the majority of the facility for some future use for juvenile and youth detention. I think part of the conversation that we had with Chester County was looking down the road at the economies involved with both of those, both a detention center and facility for youth who pose a danger to themselves and to others, and then sort of a new approach to juvenile justice where there's a different facility. Going back to the agreement with Chester County, having a proposed 1 year with an option for a second year gives us the time frame for Mr. Azari and for the board to determine what the program's going to look like going forward, so we don't have to rush into something. And that also gives us the ability to resist any pressures we would have to reopen the facility before that program is in place, and we understand what that approach will be on a looking forward basis. But I think one of the options that we wouldn't rule out is a longer-term relationship with Chester County where we can look at both of those paths and do it in a way that's to the benefit of the young adults, but also to one that makes financial sense.
Speaking only for myself, I approach it with more of an open slate. I remember being in private practice and going to that juvenile facility to represent juveniles. I didn't like it then. And then as a board member, I went to the closed facility. I didn't like that. I look at it as an opportunity to look at everything, and that's why I look forward to going out to Chester County to see what Chester County has. But so many things have changed now, with youth having a lot of different needs. It's not just you committed a crime, we're going to lock you up until we have a hearing. There could be a lot of other things going on. So I'd like to look at it as a clean slate. Let's look at every possible opportunity for youth. It may not be cookie cutter, one size fits all, because every juvenile may have something a little different. So I look at it as a clean slate. I want to hear from everybody who has something to do with the facility, whether it's central booking, which was formerly the juvenile facility. Let's see what Chester County has. Let's see what else is out there. Glen Mills may even be in the mix, who knows? Okay.
So again, I think with the feedback from the board and also conversations with Mr. Madden and others, there's a short-term plan that doesn't preclude long-term options. And it may even be to the point where the facility that was built as really a jail may not meet the goals and objectives of this board down the road. So again, having as much as maybe 2 years under the interim agreement with Chester County will give the board the opportunity to talk about what the future should look like without us having to rush into it, and appreciate that operating window that we're being provided to do that.
It would also be helpful to outline the time frames of all of these decisions, because sometimes we're having conversations about the facility as it was and outstanding issues that we still, I don't think, have gotten completely resolved as it relates to the records and
Right.
things of that nature. And then other times we're having conversations about the future, which is all in the purview of this board, but there's intersections that are happening in between. And it's a little bit hard to keep all of the timelines together. So it would be nice to have like, our short term is this, and this is the duration, and we have, a secure option for this duration. We have to make these decisions, and maybe this is for Mr. Irizarry, but
Right.
to start thinking about how these conversations are structured, especially related to the decisions we have to make, and also the information we need in advance so we can come to these conversations more prepared. Would be more helpful for me to feel like I was making prudent decisions.
Mr. Azari and I also talked in terms of budgeting for this year and into next, how to use the existing resources that are there to give him the opportunity to hire the staff that he needs to help provide that documentation, those concepts to the board to shape the future. So this year, there's sufficient funding for him to hire the staff that he needs to do the reconciliation you just talked about, as well as the future visioning. And then due to the council's and the county's budgeting process, we're going to have next year's plan shaped probably by October. So at the next board meeting, he'll be able to, I don't want to speak for you, but you can take this conversation over when I'm done with this sentence. And really, he'll look at this year's budget, shape it, and then next year's in terms of what he needs to do. So David?
Yeah, again, it'd be completely in proposal form, so want to talk a lot about what a first year looks like, right, in front of the board, get everybody's feedback, get your approval, as well as, what the funding associated with that first year may look like. Want to get in front of you all, get your feedback, and at some point in time, get your approval, I think would be helpful.
So I hope at the next meeting, the board, we could have the discussion about structure for this year and the budget, and then together we can work on what the budget will look like next year. And if we need to make adjustments mid-year, then we should have that conversation as well.
And, I'm sorry,
I was
Joanne.
just say, I think that if you could include, which you probably, just the staffing requirements so that you're looking at, or what other managers you're looking at putting on your team, or whatever resources you need. I think that we would be really interested in that.
Sure.
For my part, I will say I'm very much in the same place mentally as where Judge Nichols is. I think we had a near-term, and we still have a near-term, significant problem. And hopefully with Chester County, we have a solution that removes some of the near-term pressure and urgency. And now that we have Mr. Irizarry, leading the ship, that we can really put kind of leaves on the decision tree, that we, understanding Chester County, what that looks like. Is it really just a short-term fix, or is it something that we ought to consider longer term? Are there other facilities that more align with what, we would like juvenile detention to look like in Delaware County? Or, is Lima something that really should be, transformed into what we like? I think we put ourselves in a better position to make a more informed decision across those various decision trees.
Yeah, and if I could make a comment, I think, if we're able to pull this contract off with Chester County, which is looking promising, right, gives us up a year to 2 years to really plan this thing out, right? We have a temporary plan. At that point, we've piloted something. We're saying that, hey, we partner with a neighboring county. What's that look like, right? Are the young people who are involved getting their bang for their buck, right? So that gives us one option. Option two is obviously to look at, a structure that's already in place, and renovating it and making it to what the board and myself, our vision. And then third is, hey, maybe we go to another option. We have, Councilman Mountain is talking about possibly Glen Mills or other structures within the community. So I think, once, Executive Director Lazarus and I are able to pull off this contract, gives us a little bit of lead room to really engage it in the planning process, and really going to be able to utilize the time on the board when we have presentations to bring folks in to say, to give you a look at other municipalities, how they do it, for sure.
So do I understand it correctly? Next meeting, you'll be bringing a proposal, which I would imagine would be an outline of the planning and then implementation. I'm kind of seeing this as like a strategic plan.
Sure.
We
So,
have the years to support that. I'm also hearing, and I also agree that I think as a board, we need to have objectives and goals and then action steps. Because we don't want a year or two to come and then we're trying to figure it all out at the same time. So is that what I'm understanding that we'll receive next meeting?
Yep, so 10 days in.
You're doing a great job already.
Able to write what, generally what my first year strategy looks like. Obviously, I need a lot of feedback from the expertise here. I'll break it down in stages. Every stage, allow the board to give feedback in terms of, hey, this sounds like it's feasible, it sounds like it may not be. I think post-meeting, we'll be able to come up with something more concrete. And then I think the strategy, my hope with the board's approval is the strategy is going to lead going forward what these meetings look like, right? Be able to present out on different stages of the strategy, where we are, get your feedback on that as well. Definitely have a lot of ideas about bringing folks in to present on, whether it's technical, training and technical assistant providers. I've already spoke with the Department of Justice and those folks down there, being able to come down and help us out with this process. They've done it in other cities. So no shame to my game. Folks who have done this in other places, bring them down, allow them to present to the board on this is how it's done, this is how they can provide some services to us. And collectively, we can say, hey, let's go forward with this, or let's try a different organization.
Unless there's anything else on this item, I think that the last comments you were making, Dave, is a good segue to the next item, which is, discussion, which we have every month on presentations offered for future meetings. Again, you're 10 days on the job, but
Sure.
Any thoughts again that people who could speak to this board, to the public, on topics obviously relevant to what we're trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, I mean, if I can, I'll give a brief overview of what 10 days look like and who I was able to meet with, if folks are interested. So my very first day, I sat down with the Office of Planning, particularly their GIS folks, right? Just trying to talking about where's the crime data and looking at crime mapping. I kind of wanted to know where delinquency was happening most within the county, what times of the day, what's the demographic of the young people who are mostly involved. So we looked at that. I met with the leadership of the Public Defender's Office, met with the leadership of the Juvenile Probation Department, met with leadership of the District Attorney's Office. I met with the Executive Director of Glen Mills. I met with the U.S. Department of Justice. Really wanted to talk through about their TTA that they provide to counties who are going through similar processes. Met with leadership of the Annie E. Casey Foundation, who again work a lot with juvenile justice reform. Hopefully get a lot of those folks to the table just to present out on what a partnership looks like in Delco with some of these organizations. I think some key meetings that we're able to schedule that are coming up, meeting with Honorable Judge Kelly, I think in the next 2 days. Leadership of the Department of Human Services. We're able to establish a tour Chester County Detention. There's an organization called Children First Pennsylvania who reached out to me, and I'll be meeting with them this week in Philadelphia. Office of Workforce Development, really want to look at different strategies to employ young people who are going through the juvenile justice system. And then I had a conversation with the CEO of YAP. His name is Gary Ivory, based out of, I think, Texas, but have a meeting scheduled with him as well. A lot of different agencies I want to bring to the board to present. Obviously, we talked about the DOJ. Out of Drexel University, there's an organization called Heal and Hurt People, which focuses on trauma-informed care for males of color. Power Corps PHL, which is a model, workforce development model in Philadelphia. Really would like Philadelphia's Juvenile Probation Unit to come here and talk about some of their community supervision and electronic monitoring services. And just through the District Attorney's Office, I was getting a lot of community-based people who are doing good work out there, trying to get them on the calendar as well. So as I hear community-based providers who are doing great things, I want to bring them to the table just so the board can hear them out and some of the good work they're doing. But between local, state, and federal partners, really want to get them to the table to just talk about different ways to go about this.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from the board?
It sounds like you've.
Busy 10 days.
Busy.
Busy
I don't want
10
to put
days.
anything else on your plate. It sounds like you, got a lot done. I would just encourage you to reach out. As you said, I heard you say community partners, people that can represent success from individuals who went through a detention center.
Sure.
A recipient of services. And I would also encourage you to speak to a victim.
Sure.
Or a survivor, a loved one, or a parent or caregiver of a victim.
Sure.
And then I appreciate the Glen Mills meeting that you had. I had also the opportunity to meet the new executive director there, and they're doing such fabulous work that they have now 3 times offered their facility to be toured by us, because it's very much a trauma informed environment that they just created, and it's remarkable. So if you have the opportunity, I'm just putting more things on your plate, but thank you. And also the IU. I mean, I've brought up the Delaware County Intermediate Unit. We've had folks from the IU here, and I know that they're really looking forward to having that opportunity to meet.
They're on my calendar as
Great,
well.
good,
I've met with them.
You may want to reach out to the executive director of the Delaware County Bar Association.
Okay.
Just to see if there's, I know there's a committee for members of the criminal defense bar.
Okay.
And so through the executive director of the Bar Association, they may have some input. Clearly, working with the public defender's office is the right way to go, but there still may be some input that you can get from the private bar.
Understood.
And get them involved, not just because they represent some juveniles, but they may have some ideas and some things that they could help us with.
Understood. Judge, do you have a connection over there? If I can,
No, you can just give them a call.
gotcha. I got you.
Just Delaware County Bar Association.
Great.
And
Great.
Mary Walk, our director of OJS, is on their executive board,
There
too.
you go.
Phenomenal.
If I could add one thought, and every now and then you get an indicator that we're doing the right things. Before David started, before Melissa Lyon, who's our health director who started today, and before Laura Williams, who's our incoming warden at George W. Hill, started, they all exchanged conversations about getting involved with a health basis for corrections as well. So what was rewarding about that, one is the different approach, understanding that many of the challenges people who are placed in our care face are either related to mental health or substance addictions. But also the fact that 3 people coming in, before they even started, began that conversation, is a very strong indicator that the board, council has hired well and hired people who understand the vision that all of you who are concerned in this area have is the right way to go, and you're hiring the right people to do that. So I found that to be just a tremendously positive and encouraging act that they took even before their engagement with the county started.
Anything else from the board on this topic? All right. Next on the agenda is any new business for the board. Is there anything from members?
I just have old business, which is the condition of the building and what's in it. We toured it with council and got clearance from the AG, but I don't know, all those records are still there, there's paper, if people are gonna start doing work in there, there's still an awful lot of work to move equipment, records, and other things out of that building and put them somewhere. I don't know.
Well, I'm happy to engage in that process.
Yeah.
A little bit of direction in terms of what department oversees that, but I'm happy to oversee that day to day.
Yeah, Ms. Smith, is there anything from your end? Any update there, or is it still an action item?
So I got confirmation that we could relocate the documents as long as we identified where they came from. And in other words, where within the building that they came from. So what room they were removed from. And I believe I got an answer on the equipment. I know I did ask. I think I did get an answer. That was an issue that was dangling. I will double check what that answer was, because off the top of my head, I'm not remembering now. But I know that the documents we are fine to move the documents as long as we can document the sort of chain of custody of the documents, so to speak.
There's copiers, printers, computers.
Right. There's a lot of electronic equipment. And I did ask that question, and I just don't remember whether I got an answer, and if so, what that answer was. But I will double check and I will follow up if I did not get an answer.
Yes, it's the controller's point. Now that there's movement on that facility, I think it adds urgency to, moving forward there. And Mr. Lazarus, if you might work with Mr. Irizarry and Ms. Smith to assemble whatever resources we need from the county to get that done.
We will, and I think we'll commit that we'll come back with an update on where that process is at your next meeting.
Okay, so
You
perhaps
may-
we'll
you
add
may
that
need-
to, we'll
I'm
actually
sorry,
add
you
that to
may
the
need
agenda.
outside help for that. I'm
I
just giving you
absolutely
a
agree,
heads up.
absolutely agree with you.
Okay.
So let's make a note to add that
Okay.
to the agenda for next month.
Okay.
We'll have an update.
Okay, I do have an answer. I can follow up with Joanne separately with respect to the equipment, because I did get an answer to that question.
You could go to Mr. Lazarus
Okay, that's fine.
or David. Honestly, it's
Yep.
all your equipment now.
Understood.
Okay.
All right, anything else from the board? New business or old business, I guess?
I guess I had one question. Mr. Lazarus, you mentioned that there was a group that's working with the architect on the design that included the DA, the president judge, and the public defender. I wasn't sure if Mr. Irizarry was included on that group that's working with the architect that's designing the central booking facility, but I just think it might be a good idea as a key stakeholder in the facility if he would be added to that group.
That work started before Mr. Irizarry did, and just because it's important for us to push that forward, I asked Mark Woolley to do that, who's the deputy executive director, but certainly Mr. Irizarry will be brought in, if you will, to the group.
You're really saying as an input point, not necessarily as the person to spearhead it.
Right, no, not to spearhead it, just as an input point,
That's
to
what I-
represent the,
That's what I understood as
Represent the
well.
board.
yes.
It's just, we actually now have the, if you will, the arms and legs to push a lot of things forward. So we're excited about moving things as quickly as we can, particularly as it relates to central booking and processing, because that's got a major, major impact on the population out of George W. Hill.
Thank you.
All right. Next item is public comment. And again, it's a little clunky doing this hybrid, but I will check to see if there have been any comments via email. While I do so, if there's anyone from our massive audience here in person today who'd like to speak, now is certainly their time to do so. And I don't see anything that's come through by email. Has anyone seen anything? I haven't. All right. So if nothing further from the public, any other last parting thoughts from members of the board?
I think I misspoke when I said Glen Mills. I think the name changed now. Is it what, Clock Tower? Is that the new name for it?
Oh, not that I've heard, but.
They
thought it was
do
clock
have
tower.
some sort of
Anyway.
new towers, like the watchtower
Anyway.
or something. yes.
Just in case I'm.
But you could be telling us. I just wanted to thank Jim for all your coordination and your efforts to keep us so organized during a tough time when we didn't have a director. So I just wanted to thank you.
You're here.
Yes, thank you.
Tough shoes to fill, for sure.
All right, anything else from the board? From the Zoom board members? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Okay, heard motion a second. Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.